Hey, how you doing? It's T Mango here. You are listening to the Liverpool Connection Podcast, and these are the music and football episodes.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Liverpool Connection Podcast. This is music and football episode where I bring on a musician, DJ and producer to talk about the two loves, which is music and football. Today I've got a great guest. Probably again, one of my favourite tracks that came out, I think early 2000s, mid 2000s. It was called Chutney and it was on John Digweed's Bedrock. It's something that I'd never really heard before on John's label. It was trippy as hell, and especially on the dance floor, you would just lose your mind to it. And then he brought his remix, I believe, 2008 of Chutney, which was I thought was even better than the first one. But he goes by T Mango, but his name is Tom Mangan. He is label boss at Super Unknown and also has Million Hands. He's put loads and loads of tracks out on Mule, Compact, House, which is Will Sol's label, Permanent Vacation, etc., etc., etc. He's been in the game for a long time, so I can't wait to get into it with him. But he's also a Liverpool supporter, which is, the best of both worlds. I've had so many great guests on here who support different teams, and it's so nice to get a Liverpool supporter back on here to talk about the Reds. What a season we're having. But Tom, welcome to the pod, mate.
Thanks very much, bud. Thanks very much, Daz. Lovely to be here. Thank you for such a lovely intro. And pleased that the records, even the old ones, have tickled your fancy. So yes, nice to be here, man.
Do you want to talk football or music first?
We can do football first if you like. Sure, let's go for that.
All right. Well, as I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna ask. Why Liverpool Football Club for you?
Why Liverpool Football Club for me? As you can hear from my voice, I am not a Scouser. I wasn't born in Liverpool. I've obviously been to Liverpool Football Ground. I've been to Liverpool a good handful of times. Essentially, I guess if I'm completely honest, the reason I'm a Liverpool fan is I grew up in the 80s and I loved football. I've always played football to a fairly reasonable standard as a younger man. But as a kid, I always wanted to be a footballer, and Liverpool were the team that were doing the business. I didn't really have any guidance. I sort of mentioned to you before we started recording, my dad likes football, but it's weird actually. He's kind of transitory, like, who he's into, but he has no real allegiance with any club. So I just sort of found, I found my own way, and finding my own way was essentially, completely honestly, following the team that were the best team at the time, which is Liverpool. But you don't know that necessarily when you're like 5 or 6. You just you're like, right, this is my team. And only recently, if I'm honest with you, have I been sort of investigating it and almost trying to rationalize the pain that you feel when your team loses, and where you sort of almost you take it personally, and it can really fuck up the rest of your day. And trying to be like mindful and a kind of grown up about things and be like, it's just a game of football, But as your man said, it's, what did he say? It's I can't remember what he said. It was something like, it's not just football, it's more important than that. Or it's, it was Bill Paisley, I think. Fuck it, I can't remember what the quote is. I thought I had it, but I haven't got it. But yeah, that's how I became a Liverpool fan, man. And have supported Liverpool non-stop. I've never considered switching allegiances. I've never considered, and I do know, I was having a really interesting conversation with another dude in music over dinner, Giles Peterson's manager. And he confided in me that he used to support Millwall. And then at one point, him and his son just kind of switched to Arsenal. That him and his stepson switched to supporting Arsenal. And I was like, I don't think you could do that, can you? I don't think you can just change sides. But it was, he was going to Millwall, and his stepson was black, and there was a lot of kind of racism at Millwall at the time, and it was when Arsenal were the Invincibles, and so they were like, "Should we go and see what it's like at Arsenal?" And they went along. They're like, "This is much fucking better than Millwall," and so they switched allegiances, and I was like, "Oh, fair enough. I can't really." Initially I was all ready to sort of really lay into him, and I was like, "Oh, fair enough. You've got a reasonable backstory." But yeah, but I've supported Liverpool so I am now 48 years old, so for probably 43 years.
Who was your childhood hero then? Footballing hero?
Weirdly, I think it was Alan Kennedy. I think I had a real thing for Alan Kennedy. I loved Alan Hansen as well. That kind of era, and then obviously coming through, in more recent times, Stevie obviously is hero among men. And then even more, I guess the tail end of that era, seeing like not probably realizing at the time how fucking good Suarez was when he was with us. Just seeing him score those goals against Norwich, they came up on my Insta feed the other day. I was like, fucking hell, he was some player, absolutely an absolute rocket. So, but I mean, anyone and everyone who's there, basically, I love to watch. I love to watch us winning. I think, you mentioned again in the preamble, like music kind of has these cycles, right? I mean, everything has cycles. And I guess it's nice to, having joined the fandom sort of journey, I guess at a high point, right? And then it kind of goes down and down and down. And then eventually you get back to a high point again, winning the Champions League, obviously, 2008. Losing the Champions League several times was a fucking low point. I took my dad to Kiev, actually. We went to Kiev to see us lose against Real Madrid, which was a horrible sucker punch when Ramos diddled Salah in like the first sort of 5 minutes with that sort of strange little shoulder tug thing. Yeah, I'm sort of rambling slightly, but yeah, it's nice to be back in an upcycle where we're winning games of football and looking good doing it. That's a lovely thing. Beautiful, love it.
Yeah, the 80s. Obviously, I'm a 70s kid. I'm a little bit older than you, but I went when I was 6. So it was my granddad that kind of dragged me to the ground, and it wasn't about the football for me, because as a 6-year-old, you can't really focus on one thing. So I was a people watcher for like years. I'll just look around and just watch people. And I think I started to appreciate it when I started to get like 10 years old, 11. I was able to, go with my mates more. And then you really start to watch the football. But there were so many in the 80s, your John Barnes, your Ian Rushes, just too many Liverpool players that were just so good.
I mean, yeah, late 80s, early 90s. Yeah.
It's some of the best football I've ever seen. And then obviously, like you said, the 90s, early 2000s weren't the best. And then, Stevie comes around, and then Cara, and then, Sammy Houpier, Alonso. You start to, wow, this football team's back. We didn't win as much as I think we should have done with Stevie. I wish we would have won the league with Stevie. But then, Klopp shows up, and within a year or two, you're like, this is some of the best football I've ever seen in my entire life. And it does begrudge me, that there is a team called Man City that has ruined some of my later years because of, and I will always say this about Man City. What they do on the pitch, they're a fantastic team. They are, it's what they do off the pitch that pisses me off, what they've got going on, cooking the books and all that. And, we took them twice so close. But with Klopp, I mean, what's your thoughts on Klopp? Because, as we all know, last January, I woke
Heartbreak.
I woke up to, my phone going off the hook, and I'm reading stuff and my mates aren't making sense. I tell
Catholic
you,
House, actually.
I thought it was just nonsense.
Yeah, I
I
was at
didn't
Catholic
believe
House when it
it.
happened, and he was like, "Have you seen that Klopp's going?" And I was like, "Oh fuck!" And I really did think it was that kind of. It's like when when someone famous dies, it's that kind of, oh shit. Um, but he was, magical dude. I mean, I guess everything, the impermanence of all things, right? So he wasn't going to be there forever, but he did give us some fucking magical times. He just seems like such a lovely dude. And me and my mate Angus, who I mentioned to you again in the preamble, who's done some engineering for Cass as well. He's also a Liverpool fan, and we've often had the chat like, how fucking great would it be to have a beer with Jurgen? You know that he's going to be sort of, mentality monsters, and he's going to be armsy and like, just be such a beautiful thing. And I met this lad at Glastonbury last year, who's like a friend of a friend, and my mate was like, you need to tell Tom your Champions League story. And I was like, what is your Champions League story? It's like, right. So this I need to tell you this because it is fucking it's the thing of dreams, basically. He's a Liverpool fan, and his missus is a Liverpool fan, and they're songwriters. And so they're away with my mate Leo, who is a Spurs fan. It's Liverpool Spurs in the Champions League final, which I think is like 6 years ago, maybe this year, I think. Um, so they've all gone off to this Greek island, and the lad who's a Liverpool fan, whose name I forget, Leo's mate, has basically found out that he can get tickets to the Champions League final. So he goes to the Champions League final, which, as you'll recall, was a fucking dull game of football, like really dry. I think we got a penalty like really early on. Not particularly exciting game of football. The exciting stuff happens where basically he manages to somehow get into the after party for with the team and with Jurgen, because his missus, I think his missus was doing like some songwriting for one of Little Mix or something, and one of the Little Mix people's going out with Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, so they managed to do some sort of special magic. He gets into the fucking after party after they've won the Champions League, and he's in there, and there's photos of him with his arms around Jurgen and the fucking Champions League trophy. Like, as a Liverpool fan, I was like, what? You got to tell me what this is like. He's like, I can't even explain to you. I can't even explain to you the level of like excitement that was going on. And yeah, he told me some other stuff actually, which I probably shouldn't share just in case, I don't know, someone sees this and yada, yada, yada. But it said it was magical, absolutely magical. And Jurgen was exactly as you would perceive him. There was no like, who the fuck are you, or any of that business. It was just like, hey, come in, get involved, let's have a beer kind of energy. I was like, oh, so jealous, so jealous of that adventure. So yeah, I'd love to have a beer with him. I think he seems like a magical, interesting, obviously massively charismatic dude. Arne is a completely different animal in terms of I guess what you get to see of him as a human, a lot more reserved, but obviously doing magical stuff as a football manager. So you can't knock that. I would probably choose to have a beer with Jurgen though over Arne. I think if that was.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I mean, he's like the best uncle you've ever seen in your life. But I think especially for me, there's some similarity, obviously, between Shanks and Klopp. And
Mm.
then, obviously Arna's like the not as charismatic, and that's how Bob Paisley was as well. He was Mr. Quiet Man.
I
So
said Bill Paisley for some reason. I realized I've just been going through my brain. I was like, why did I say fucking Bill Paisley? Sorry. I was thinking Ian Paisley. I was like, there's a Paisley in there somewhere. Bob Paisley. Yes. Yes.
so I just think, we've invested so much in Klopp, And I think it was like a big heartbreak. But I think as a fan base, we acted like he died and he didn't. There was this mourning for like 4 months. But
Yeah.
I really do like how Liverpool Football Club dealt with it.
Mm,
And if you went online right after the season, and Klopp left, everyone was going, where's Slot? Where's the interview? Where's this? Where's that? And I really like how the club did it.
mm,
Because there was so much built up on that last game of the season, where Klopp had the big farewell. I think
mm.
the club and myself, I needed to mourn for a little while. And I think
Yeah.
Slot just going under the radar for like 5 weeks, not saying a word, just coming in. He was around Liverpool because there was pictures of him, going to restaurants and a few pubs. And I liked that. And then when he came, he did his interview. Obviously he's nowhere near what Klopp is like. And that's what you need, though. You don't need another Klopp that's going to run up to the cop and do the boom, boom, boom. That's going to be fake. Slot is totally different. But if you notice every single presser he does now, more and more of his personality is coming out. And I really like how he deals with the press. And tactically, little bit the same as Jurgen, but he's more reserved.
Mm.
And I've just noticed
Yeah,
like some of the games I think this season, if we would have kind of played the Klopp way, I think we would have lost, to be
mm,
honest.
mm,
Slot just has this team playing a certain way, and there's been less injuries
mm.
this season
Yeah,
than
that's
there
a big
was.
apparently.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
his
special training or something. Someone said he's like a real. He's part of his appeal was that he had a history of less injuries throughout throughout his managerial career as a because he really sort of like dials in the training, which in a world of small margins is an impressive skill, I guess. Some to not end up with your players being injured.
Yeah, well, there was just so many like muscle injuries last season, and this season, obviously it just seems to be the same players, and I feel so bad for Joe Gomez and then Diego Jota. Same
Mm,
same injuries happen, or over and over again, and it's just a tough one. And I think if you would have asked any Liverpool fan in August, would we, be on our way to winning number 20? I would have laughed at you because I
mm,
just thought there would be a massive drop off. I still thought we would get top four, but going for the league, it didn't even cross my mind. And then obviously, when you're a big football team like Liverpool, you expect to be going for the quad single season, right? Just like any other top team. But it just seems like in the media, Liverpool is singled out. Like,
mm,
oh, they were going for the quad, now they're going for the treble. Ah, they're not going for the treble, they're going for the double. It only seems to be Liverpool. And that
mm,
just makes me laugh because I'm sure if you ask Arsenal, Man United, Man City, Chelsea, Spurs, well, maybe not
mm,
Spurs, but going for the quadruple that's what you want to do. So I just think
mm.
the,
Yeah.
the the media is just well, the media pisses me off on a regular basis anyway, but it just seems like when Liverpool are winning something, something has to be shit. Like the league is shit.
Yeah, there was some chat about that. I saw that. I think it was maybe on BBC Sport, and it was kind of talking about um, the different teams that had won it in a similar, with a similar tally of points or in a similar sort of style. And one of them was Ferguson's United with Keane and Beckham and all the golden bollocks. And it was like, can you imagine, telling Roy Keane that they'd been given it that season? It's just bollocks, basically. I think the league's been crazy competitive this season. If anything, you look at the sides that have come through. Look at Forest. Look at Bournemouth. Um, Look at Brighton. Arsenal haven't been as consistent. Man City have kind of really slipped away, slipped off the pace. But in their stead, these other sides have come through. I mean, Forest have fucking beaten everyone, and they are just relentless. And the fact that Man United are, down in the kind of bottom half of the table always feels kind of pleasant. But I think that other than that, I think the league's been crazy competitive. I think there's, Newcastle. I guess the thing is people haven't been as relentlessly consistent as previous seasons, and that was really the job of Man City and Liverpool, right? To be there was times where I had to stop. I would start watching Man City games with the expressed desire to see them lose, and I just had to stop doing it. It was like, I've just got to stop doing this because it's fucking killing me. Every time, they'll go 1-0 down and then they'll come back and win 2-1 or 3-1, and I've just got to stop doing this. I've got to stop, wishing that they would lose, because it's not good for my soul. Whereas now, seeing them lose is a joy. It's a great thing. And but it seems like a much more traditionally competitive league. I think it's probably over the last maybe 6-7 years that it feels like it's been less, maybe, it's normally been focused around one or two teams. It's quite, I like it. The fact that you don't know, from top four who is going to, really, really show up.
Well, that's the biggest thing this season. For the Champions League places, you've got 6 teams going for it, and if I'm not just a Liverpool supporter, I'm a football supporter as well. I like what's going on with Forest, what's going on with Villa. I think they really did. Villa did fantastic against PSG. They came close to beating them. It's just great to see. Obviously not Forest. That's a fairy tale story. If Slot doesn't get Manager of the Year, then I hope what's his name, Nuno, gets it.
Yeah,
I think he's done absolutely amazing with the team.
He did great at Wolves as well, didn't he? That's the thing. He did great at Wolves. It was just that little blip at Tottenham where but he was only.
Nobody does good at Tottenham. So
I know I was having this chat with my mate last Thursday, and he is a Spurs fan, and it was like, you just look at the litany of managers that they've had who've come through who were good somewhere else, shit at Tottenham, and then go and be good somewhere else afterwards. It's like, oh, you got to ask yourself the question: what is the real, what's the real challenge here? What's the real problem? But yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm excited for the for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, number 20, Man United fans can't sing that anymore. Get one up on us. So I'm looking forward to it. Are you going to try and go to Liverpool or for the parade or?
I probably am not going to try and do that. No, just because I've got untold things coming up over the next few weeks, and what I really need to do is actually, I've just moved house, and I've had about sort of nearly 4 weeks off moving and organizing stuff and doing various things. And what I need to do is actually some work before the summer comes around, because when the summer comes around, it seems like there's loads of things and parties and stuff goes on, and it's hard to kind of really like crack on with so it's a very grown-up answer, but the answer is no, I'm not going to Liverpool. But I remember I actually got added to this group by Cassie's brother, actually, Nik, who used to run RA, and it's called Assorted Red Men. It's loads of kind of lads from like around dance music and sort of electronic music who are in this WhatsApp group. I've never met any of them, but daily there is some really solid Liverpool chat going on in there. So I'm probably a little bit like a peeping Tom. I don't really know any of them, so I'm not really chatting, but I'm there behind the curtains, just like looking occasionally. There's little gaggles of them, pockets of them going off and doing things, and went to the Rumbelows, the Newcastle game final, and various other things. So I experienced vicariously through the exploits of my other fellow Liverpool supporters, is the honest answer.
Yeah, I'm in a WhatsApp Liverpool group called LFC Pests, and it's a bunch of DJs and producers as well. So I'm not going to name names, I'll tell you, like when we stop recording, who's on there. It's absolutely mental to find out, who is actually a Liverpool supporter, and it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm, obviously because of what happened to me with my lungs, I can't fly for 3 months.
Mm.
So I was going back home for the end of the season. So, it's one
Yeah.
of those live or
Yeah.
get on the plane and like,
Right.
halfway across the Atlantic, like a lung
Yeah.
collapses again. So, I'm going for the, uh,
Go for live, I think. Yeah, that's the one.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna go probably go down the pub with me mates here and
Yeah.
enjoy it that way. Now onto the musical side, which I'm very excited to know like your roots and influences. Like when you were growing up, I always like to know, were you influenced by your mum and dad's music?
Mm.
Up?
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, so I sort of my dad had like, classic kind of stacking stereo system, um, kind of silver, polished like sort of chrome jobber, with a deck on top, pre-CD player, so cassette, and then radio, radio tuner amp vibe. And then I remember kind of him getting a separate CD player. And there was a point where I would be the post dinner party DJ. And so I would find tracks that generally stuff that I'd listen to with my dad. Um, and I would sort of try and, working, I guess, the early understanding of like working a crowd. So a crowd of what would have been at the time, my parents were quite young, so they would have probably been like early 30s. They're like 20 years older than me. So, when I was 10, 11, 12, just after dinner, like, I wonder if they'd like a little bit of this. Um, like playing them a bit of, I don't know. There were some Suspect albums in there, definitely. There was some Simply Red. There, I think they got gifted some Dire Straits, which was never really my bag. But then there was some good stuff. There was some Prince. There was some Blue Nile. There's some, the Smiths, Fairground Attraction, lots of that kind of stuff. Some Stevie Wonder, good pop stuff. I guess good, good pop music. So that was, I guess, my listening to music with my dad was really into music. Listening to music in the car with him. He took me to my first gig, which was Prince, which I think was, it was either Love Sexy tour or the Batman tour. I can't remember which one. I think maybe went to both. I think Love Sexy came first. But anyway, yeah, Prince was the first live show I ever went to see. And then that was kind of like 11, 12. And then my parents separated and I moved to Germany, to Munich, and sort of ended up like hanging out with some kids there, like 13 to 15, and just went and saw loads of people, Run DMC, Beastie Boys, um, the Lemonheads, Arrested Development, lots of kind of 90s, just trying to experience, loads of different music, and finally finding some sort of coming back to UK and getting some like excitement by like pirate radio and loads of, interesting shit that was going on around that time, which I guess was like 1992, 93.
So when did you start listening to Acid House around that time as well?
Started listening to, I guess, what was kind of like rave music. So kind of it was less directly acid house, and probably it was more like break beats, and what then pirate radio stuff was. So I guess it's a bit faster, it's a bit ravier, and then it kind of moved towards like jungle, that kind of stuff, and then from there sort of moving to London and getting a broader sort of selection of pirate stations. So then you would kind of get almost like you'd be presented with the history of house music almost. Someone will be playing some sort of more vocally stuff, you'd get some kind of Mr. Fingers, you'd get some more sort of death mix stuff, and then you'd get some more modern sort of garage stuff, which would then sort of go into become two-step, obviously, a few years later down the line. So you'd kind of get like a full smorgasbord of stuff. But also, while I started going out to clubs when I was 15, my mates were a little bit older. They were like a couple of years older than me. And so then we would go to, I lived just outside of London, and the local club was in Windsor. It was a place called House of Windsor. And we'd go and see whoever was on. And they had fucking, there was a smorgasbord of people there. And we would just try and go as often as possible. But I remember seeing Sasha there, saw Boy George there, saw Nigel Benn. I don't know if you remember, he was a DJ for a while. Bit of a thing. John Please Women, Loved Up, loads of, just as many different people as humanly possible, basically. The music was kind of it was exciting, but what was as exciting as the music was the adventure, the sort of the ecstasy fueled, like, breaking down of the walls of, like, being able to talk to people about stuff that you wouldn't normally be able to talk to them about, and just doing this kind of illicit thing, even though it kind of, it was post, I guess, illegal rave scene. It was kind of, so it was where electronic music was kind of, or acid house was moving more into discos and clubs and kind of co-opting those spaces before the kind of super club thing. But I guess it was it was that sort of human traffic energy, of like, you're getting ready, you're going to go to the place, and you get all of the excitement of going to the place and getting your shit sorted and getting your all, what you were wearing and who you were going with, and if the girls that you kind of were into were going, and what, just the whole way that it sort of unfolded. And then because of the chemical, what's the word, embellishment, the chemical kind of extras that you got, it wasn't like, okay, we're going to go out until 11 o'clock. It would go until 6, 7, 8 a.m. in the morning. So you've got all those extra hours, and in those extra hours, the combination of the hours with the kind of looseness that comes with that, with the ingesting of the chemicals, there's just so much more adventure, so much more to find out, and all that good stuff. Yeah, that was what got me excited, to be honest.
Yeah, it just opened so many people's minds, I think, as well, because, a couple of lads that I knew who were, very quiet, as soon as they popped a pill, it was Mr. Chatty, and they'd be chatting, with anyone. I mean, they'd chat with a frigging mop if they could. It broke down, door and barriers and doors, because as we all know, again, football violence was pretty bad in the late 80s, early 90s. And then, at raves, you would see different factions of football fans that you knew from matches, who you would scream across at the terraces like, "You fucking wanker," you would be like arm in arm going, "I fucking love this tune." It was, I mean, you look back on that and you go, that is the most fucking weirdest thing ever. But
Yeah,
it just fit, the times.
yeah, madness. Yeah, absolute madness. I mean, look, yeah, so so many adventures to be had. I guess that was the start of my sort of love affair with it, was that starting to go out at 15, and the I guess the illicitness of it, and the whole. I was never really like a scenester, so it wasn't like I was, with these gaggle of people, anyone who was doing anything specific. I was just with my mates, and we were just kind of going out as like fans, and just getting on it and just listening to as much music as possible. And then you start to sort of, once you enter through this kind of like this broad space, I guess, where there's loads of music that's appealing, and then it kind of almost filters down as your taste sort of gets refined. And it was around that first Renaissance CD time, and I wasn't as mad into that. Some of my mates, again, they were a little bit older, they're like a couple of years older than me, but that was like that was, like they were disciples of that vibe. And so, then we would go and see, we'd go to Renaissance, the Cross, and then we'd go to see Sasha, and then subsequently Sasha and Digweed, literally wherever we could find them. Yeah, I think we went to Wobble once. We went to Wobble once to see, was it Northern Exposure Tour? We went to Wobble in Birmingham, which I think had like a 2 or a 3 o'clock license. So we drove all the way up to Birmingham to go, got mad on it. And then I had football the next day. I was playing football on Sunday morning. So got back to my house at about, 5:30 or something, and just went straight through and went out and played football. And it's like burned into my memory, basically, that. So the team I played for, the vibe was that you would get a shirt at the game. So the shirts would be washed by the club, but you would bring your own shorts and socks. There were team shorts and socks, but you were responsible for washing them. I don't know what the reason was, but that was the vibe. And I pitched up and I had no shorts. And the only shorts they had were like this tiny little pair of extra small shorts. And I had, I'd been like, I won't go into details, but, I'd been getting involved. So I was just a little bit of a human raisin, and I put pulled these shorts on, these tiny little fucking hot pant shorts, and was there in the change room. And the rest of the team were like, "What the fuck is going on with you? What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just just trying to put these tiny little shorts on." And surprisingly enough, the manager didn't start me, and then I got subbed on, and I was like, I had to get myself up for it. I was like, "Come on, you fucking do this." And I got subbed on, ran on. I was like, "Yes, Tommy's ball, come on!" It was like full energy, and I could just hear this Tom, Tom in the distance. And I was like, "The fucking hell! Why is he not throwing me the ball?" And then eventually, sort of like looked around. The manager, he's like, "You've got to go and see the ref before we start. You've got to go and see the ref, and he's got to cross your name off a little card." So it was literally just me. Come on the pitch. Everyone's fucking waiting for me to be, for me to be signed on. I'm there in the tiny shorts, bouncing about like grey skin, trying my best to sort of pass myself off as a regular human being. So yeah, that was I didn't do that again, actually. Never went out and played football directly after raving ever again. It wasn't right.
Yeah, that's like one eye in the north, one eye in the south. Yeah, it's not a good look.
It was, my mouth was so dry. I remember my dad came to watch the game as well, and afterwards he was like, "How'd you get on?" I was like, just completely ruined. But it's given me a tale to tell, so that's that's all good. That's all good.
Yeah, that's good times. So when did you DJ first, or did you want to start producing your own stuff?
Yeah, I DJ'd. So yeah, I think I got my decks at about 18. So that's like 1995. And, we were kind of going out quite reasonably at the time. We would go into London. And then I ended up living in London with my dad and stepmom around that time. So we'd go to like Leisure Lounge, various different places. And we're just trying to kind of be part of what was going on. Just like, I just want to do this. I'm gonna work out how to do it. So I DJ'd first. And we did a couple of things. So where did we play? So I'm trying to put it in sort of timeline order. I DJ'd around, and we'd play some kind of local parties and bits and pieces. Then got to play this place called the Satellite Club, which used to be in Vauxhall, which was a cool, kind of cool little spot that we used to go to. I say little spot; it was quite a decent sized club. And I got sort of friendly with one of the residents there, and he booked us to come and me and my mate Christian to come and play. We played as like a double act, and then we played a few more things. And then I moved to Australia because my mum was living out in Australia. So around when I was about 18, I think I went to Australia for a year, and I got a job in a record shop in Melbourne called DMC Records. Which was associated with, the DMC that was here, that was kind of would do the kind of remix compilations and what have you. And I got a job working behind the counter. And I guess I think I just got a job by just basically just going in there all the time and spending what little money I had on records until eventually the guy who ran the shop, a guy called Stu, Northern Stu, uh, was like, "Do you want a job? Because this is just foolishness. You're just in here all the time." And so I got a job, and then I wasn't a sort of regular record shop wanker where I would just kind of look down my nose at you and be like, "Why the fuck are you here?" I would actually be friendly to people and try and give them records and try and find things for them. But what I did notice when I was there is there were people coming in and they had their own records and they were like, "Look, I've just made this, or I've just got this pressed." There were two guys specifically. Obviously, I've forgotten their fucking names now, but they were kind of, one of them was doing kind of early, it was like pre-perfecto or early perfecto-ish kind of prog stuff. And I just remember thinking in a very arrogant teenage way, if this fucking guy can do it, I've got to surely be able to do this. I must be able to fucking make some, I must be able to make some records. And so when I came back from Australia, I tried to find somewhere that I could learn how to do stuff, learn how to make music essentially. And I found this course, which was at Kingston University, and it was like, I think it was like music technology and music business and something else. And I was like, I'm not interested in the music business and I'm not interested in the other bit, but I'm really interested in the music technology. And it was on Kingston University campus, but there was this little bit and they had like studios. They had like a kind of big studio with like a big desk, which looked like big and fucking scary. But then they had these little programming rooms. And at the time it was, pre everything being inside the computer. So they had like a little mixer and an Akai S3000 sampler and maybe a tiny little sound module. And that was it. And I just was like, right. And you could kind of book studio time as part of the course. So you could book in for an hour or 2 hours. And what I realized after about 2 weeks was like most of the other dudes were just off like getting stoned or doing whatever the fuck they were doing. They weren't using the studio time. So I went all in on the studio time and I didn't eat. And I just fucking sat there for like 4, 5, 6 hours, just being like, do I work out this fucking, what do I need to do to make the music that sounds like this? I didn't know at the time. It took me a long time to realize that it's much easier to make certain music when you've got certain tools, right? In the same way that like, if you want to cook a certain meal, you've got to start with a certain set of ingredients, right? You can't fucking cook steak and chips if you've only got, a few eggs and some noodles and a chicken breast, right? You're always going to end up with something, that's relative to the ingredients you start with. But for years, I was like, I'm going to make a record that sounds like the Sasha's remix of Talk to Me by Hysterics with like, 2 spoons and a fucking egg cup, but yeah, that was my way in. Essentially, started with DJing, and then went and learned how to, I guess that the how to make the machines do stuff, and then sort of from there for with some sense of taste, obviously, and some basic musical knowledge. Like I could play the guitar, and kind of taught myself a bit of piano, and then kind of incrementally worked stuff out from there on.
I think the biggest thing, that I've had so many producers on the show is a lot of them have the ideas, but then it gets passed on to the engineer, and the engineer seems to be the one that like puts it all together. Justin Drake, absolutely amazing. Loved all his stuff at Peace Division. He's a fantastic engineer, and it seems like 80% of the producers I've had on here go to Justin to do the engineering. Do you like to do everything, or do you pass it on to an engineer?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was the engineer, so I did engineering for other people. So I do everything myself. I don't master my own stuff, but yeah, I do everything else myself, and kind of have always done that. Probably would have been a shorter learning curve if I'd have just worked out how to find some people who knew how to do the thing. but hindsight's 2020, right? And you find this out as you go along. But there were people that I learned from along the way, specifically, um, like I did when I first moved to South London. I kind of I sort of reached out to some local dudes, and I noticed. You remember Whoop Records? You remember those guys? Whoop.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so they were like, I found out they were about 10 minutes down the road in, they were in Wandsworth, we were in Tooting. And so I saw like, I did this real fucking chance situation, but it was kind of like, I had a record and I read on it, it said like, SW12 or something. And I was like, oh, I wonder where that is. And then it sort of, I found out where it was. I was like, oh, they're only 10 minutes away. I think it even had their phone number on it. And I just reached out and I ended up speaking to Joel, who used to run Whoop, and then went down, got absolutely annihilated drunk, like first meeting, and we just went and got hammered completely. Like probably it's one of the drunkest I've been during the day with Joel and Mike Monday, who had the studio there. So Jolie had his office, and then Mikey Monday had the studio. And ended up, we tried to write some records together and we never quite sort of finished them. But what we did do, which is quite funny considering both of us now coach artists on how to finish their tunes. But what we did do is, he knew, he was in Beat Foundation originally, Mikey Monday, with Andy Cato from Groove Armada, those two cracking Beat Foundation records. And he was just, really lovely, knowledgeable, effusive dude. And he just told me shit that completely blew my mind at the time. I was like, oh, I wish I'd known this sooner. One of the things was, again, it sounds so fucking simple. If there was this real issue I had with finding a kick drum that had enough tonk on it, that like really cut through. And I was like, I've been tuning this fucking kick drum for like, what seems like weeks, and I've tried EQing it and I've done all these things to it. He was like, it's just probably just not the right kick drum if you've got to spend all that time on it. I was like, that was the first point. And the second point was, you can just take a kick drum off a record that you like and just use that kick drum. And I was like, oh, why did no one tell me this? Why have I only just found this out? And he's like, yeah, you just and I was like, what, you can do that? He's like, yeah, no, watch. You just get the record, you find the first beat with the kick drum, you nick that kick drum, and then you've got a kick drum that works. It's like, oh, fucking hell. The amount of time that he could have saved me during my production learning journey. I guess because it kind of, learning at that time, it predated YouTube and, just being able to go into the interweb and say, how do I, do this thing? You just kind of had all these bits of kit and you're just like, I want to make a record that sounds like Daft Punk, or that sounds like, as I said, like sounds like a Sasha remix or whatever. But there wasn't like a tutorial. This is how you make a Daft Punk record. It was like, you just fucking try and figure it out, basically. So I don't know what I've waffled on.
For you, are you more inclined to do hardware than you are digitally?
What I have, I'm not specifically more inclined one way or the other. What I've been without a studio for about the last year, through various kind of situational changes, and prior to that, I've had a studio. So what was that? 2024. I've had a studio for the last 8 years. Which had my drum machines, my synths, my computer, and so everything kind of is like Ableton sort of locks everything together. But what I realized over the last year is there is, trying more and more to kind of be in the box through necessity as opposed to anything else, just because I didn't have the space. I didn't have a consistent space to write. I do enjoy having things to hit and play and engage with much more than I do kind of writing music inside the box. So it's much more convenient to just be able to write music on your laptop. And I have written, some of the records that I've written that have connected on a bigger scale, I've written on my laptop, created on my laptop. But from an enjoyment perspective, I like having, I haven't got loads of stuff. I've got like a Juno, I've got this kind of Behringer recreation of a like a vocoder. It's like a VC330, I think it's called. I've got an MPC, a couple of drum machines, mixer. It's not like you see some people's studios and you're like, fucking hell, that's like, a life's work. Mine's, relatively portable-ish, but it is enjoyable having the kit. And a 101, actually, my 101's in the Mender, my SH 101. But having the stuff definitely makes me, it feels like there's something about pure digital, because it's infinitely editable. It's harder to know sometimes when to stop. And generally, in my experience writing and releasing records, for the last 22 years, the best stuff, or the stuff that connects the best, is often the stuff that comes through fastest. So it's the stuff that happens and you manage to capture it, and then you manage not to fuck it up, and you somehow get it out without your inner critic going, you need to do loads of shit to this, because that's where it's kind of enjoyable playing with it when it's good. But what happens is you kind of play with it, and then you start to get bored of it. And then as you get bored of it, you change it. And then as you change it, you move away from that place where you were excited, the initial excitement. And eventually what you end up with is something completely different. It's got the same name, but it's like Trigger's Broom, it's got all new, everything's new about it. It's just got this, it's just called Trigger's Broom. But it's not really the same thing. And that's how, I don't know, many ideas have been lost that way. So the pure digital route allows for that eternal fuckery, where you can just tweak stuff forever. Whereas when you've got stuff and you're recording it to audio, or you kind of have to make commitments early, and that for me works better. Long answer to a short question.
Yeah, well, I think with a lot of hardware, it can be temperamental. It might sound this way one day, and then you get on it the next day, and you're like, where did that sound go? And you can't get it back. And I've got equipment I get frustrated with, and I'd love to just throw it out the fucking window. Because I'm still, after all these years, I'm still trying to wrap my head around Ableton. I really am. It's frustrating because, I've got mates that have been on it a week, and they're already making their tracks and stuff, and I'm still going, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? I'm still like, I'm like you. I've got to be able to touch and bang on it and tweak it, and just staring at a computer screen all fucking day just drives me absolutely insane. I get frustrated way too quickly on Ableton. I really do. I just, I've done Reason, I've done Logic, but Ableton, at the moment, it's a big fuck you right now. And I'll probably come back to it, in a month and try and give it another go. But yeah, it's one of those where it's not clicking for me.
Yeah, I mean, some people vibe with different different tools and different ways of doing stuff. I think the thing to remember is it's kind of, there's probably a football analogy here, right? But it's generally a simple game. We make it more complicated by adding layers and layers and layers and layers of stuff. But really, it's simple. If you listen to good electronic music, it's really simple stuff, and especially the stuff that stands the test of time, it's got 3 or 4 things in it, 5 things in it, and you're like, oh, this is so, such a beautiful record. It's such a magical record, such a banging record. You think about Josh Winkhire, States of Consciousness, for example. I mean, it's like some drums and an acid noise and a fucked up vocal. And it's fuck knows how many times it's streamed and, been re-released and sold and yada, yada, yada. But it's got energy. But it's also got space, because there's not 10 synths and 50 different things. It's just enough room for everything to breathe. So it's kind of, stripping it back to its essential components and figuring out what it is you want to do, on a base level, as opposed to trying to learn all of the ways that it should work. It's you don't need to know how a car works in order to drive a car, right? You can enjoy a car. You don't have to know why the pistons do things. I don't know anything about cars. I'm going to fucking show myself up here. But you don't have to know how all of the bits of it work in order to enjoy driving it. And it's the same with Ableton, I think. You don't have to understand it all. You just have to understand that I want to use it to get from here to there. And so, to figure out what those things are that you want to learn. And then, because then you can cut out all of the other stuff and you can just kind of hone in on, okay, how do I record my bass lines, or how do I, make my drums go dum tish, or whatever it is that you want to do. That's how I would approach it. Don't know if
I'm just going to rip off other people's kick drums and
go for it. It's a great starting place. It's a great starting place, mate. Honestly, this is a great starting place.
Well, how do you, as an artist, right? In this day and age, there's so many tracks come out every single day, on Beatport. I miss the days of going in a record shop and spending a few hours there just to find that one gem. As we all know, record shops were just meeting places as well, to meet your mates, to have a conversation with the owner or the record salespeople. But like going on Beatport or wherever, Tracksource or Juno, I just lose the soul of searching, for those gems. And 90% are just absolute shite. Because anyone can produce a track now. But you can definitely tell that they haven't gone to an engineer and they haven't mastered it, because it just sounds absolutely awful. But for you as an artist, again, as I said in the beginning, Chutney for me just took progressive house to a whole different level for me, because it was twisted, it was trippy, and at that time with John's label, it was just, banging prog house. So Chutney was something different. Now, when you make a track like that, as an artist, do you always go like, in your own head go, I need to better the next track? Or do you just go, okay, that one went there, I want to do something completely different?
I think there's a sense of wanting to better stuff for sure. And I think it's kind of, there is some of that naturally happens by making, the more music you make, the better there's this guy, I think it was Mikey Monday actually, who introduced me to him, called Ira Glass. And he talks about, he's a radio guy, and he talks about this taste skill gap. You get into doing the thing because you have taste. You want to express your taste, right? So I wanted to express my taste, but your taste sits out ahead, and then your skill is always trying to sort of catch up to your taste. So by doing stuff over and over again, hopefully you get to, make a record that sounds like, a Daft Punk record or a Prince record, or whoever your person is, whoever the people are that you want to kind of catch up to, or a Moody Man record. And I guess with to complete honesty, with Chutney, I was trying to make a fucking Daft Punk record, but I had no idea how to do anything at all. I mean, obviously I had an idea how to do some things, but I didn't have, I listened back to that record, I'm like, fucking hell, there's so many different things going on here. How did I squeeze them all in one record? But at the time, we were in the studio in Tooting, which my friend Angus has still got, and he still does some work for Caster, and he's had for now like 25 plus years. We shared this space, and one day I was kind of, you would come in through the ground floor. Our studio was up on the first floor. I remember coming in through the front door and sort of seeing someone had left a record by the front door, and it just said Nick Muir, blah blah blah, address on it. And I was like, isn't he half a Bedrock? And so subsequently sort of ended up like having a chat with him, and it was Nick Muir from Bedrock. He had the studio downstairs, and sort of, we would chat over tea. I didn't really drink tea, but I'd be in the tea drinking area, and we'd sort of have a little chat and stuff. And he's absolutely legendary human, such a nice dude. And he, over time, we sort of, we would get chatting. We got chatting about, after I said, are you Nick Muir from Bedrock? He was like, yeah. I was like, fucking hell, I go to Bedrock like, every week. basically on Thursday at Heaven was Bedrock. And, he started listening to my music. So I started playing him my music, and Chutney, I played him, and I played it to him, I think, because I thought the break had fucking chops on it. I wasn't sure about the rest of the tune, but the break had this kind of big, like, white noisy thing, which wasn't really a thing at the time. And I remember playing it to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is a good one. I'll play this to John." But he listened through to the mix, and I think he played it to John initially. John was like, "No, it's not. Don't want it. Don't like it." And I went to speak to Nik about it. He was like, "No, John doesn't like it, but I'm going to play it to him again." And he did a little edit, and he essentially, I think, found a kick drum that worked. I'd sampled a kick drum from an Armand van Helden record. This is after the information from Mikey, but I didn't understand, again, at the time, my fucking knowledge of whatever. It was like, it's a kick drum. But, it sounds fucking really obvious. But the kick drum I had was right down here. It was like, and what he did was he put something in at the level. So it just had this more energy. And I think he compressed it a little bit, and I think he maybe cut out some bars somewhere. And so he did this, the Nick Muir edit of my track. And then he played it to John, and John was like, "Okay, yeah, I think it sounds good." And then, they ended up banging it out. I think it was the Delta Heavy tour that they were doing. Him and Sasha were touring the US with that like jumbo sound system, and banged it for them. And then they put it out on Bedrock. But to answer your question, like, the bettering of the record, it wasn't like I was trying to write that record, I guess. So there wasn't really like it connected on a level that I wasn't. That I was like, oh fucking hell, that's the thing. I think it sold like 5,500 copies or something in its first week, which at the time wasn't loads, but then also is a lot of records, right? So and certainly by today's standards, like if you sold 5,500 records, you'd be like, I mean, mind completely blown. So I guess at the time I just kind of, it's like, what was I, like 22, 23 or something. I just kind of was like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, got a record out on Bedrock. I never got a single gig offer or show or anything. Never played at Bedrock. No, I never asked though. That's the thing. I've realized again that in later life, I never knocked on, John's door or John and Nick's door when they were together and was like, "Can I come and play Bedrock?" There was this, I was very, very shy generally. And so it was kind of, I was like, oh, well, if they want me to come, they'll ask me, that kind of thing. They just never fucking asked me. But yeah, man, I mean, it started a relationship with Bedrock, with John. I did, then some remixes of some other things. So I did a remix of Stoppage Time by Guy Gerber, which is a big record for them. My remix, not so much. I did a remix of Brancaccio and Asher, Everybody or Every Day or something. That was quite a decent remix, I seem to recall. And then, yeah, load of other things afterwards. I think I was kind of, by that point, was sort of, I felt like the prog thing wasn't really my, it didn't feel like it was my home space. I didn't, I kind of felt like a tourist, although I feel like that still, to be honest, about most things. I don't necessarily feel like I'm in. I always feel like I'm sort of slightly on the outside looking in, occasionally sort of offering something, and then just retreating back into the shadows.
Is that where Team Mango then showed its head?
Yeah, I was doing. I did quite a bit of Tom Mangan stuff for various different. I think the first remix I ever got, I think that was as a result of, was from Spencer Parker. Actually, I remember bumping into him somewhere. He had a label, or he was A&R of a label. My first ever Tom Mangan remix. But yeah, I did some of my own stuff, and then Cass and I'd been sort of doing some engineering for Cass, and then what did we do? We did a track for Wall of Sound. We did a track that ended up getting signed to Wall of Sound, and that was the start of the kind of Cass and Mangan partnership, as opposed to me doing some engineering for him and it going out as his records, which I did for a couple of his EPs. We started doing stuff as a partnership. So then that was the next iteration, kind of doing that stuff. And we did thing for Wall of Sound, and then we did some work with T. Schwartz's label Fine, which was run by Kevin, again, another lovely human, also used Drakey as his engineer, who is now Isle of Jura, kind of sort of Balearic, stuff and like reissues label. But at the time, he ran this label called Fine, and then he went on afterwards to start a label called Suba, which did a lot of kind of, really sort of solid house stuff. So we did that stuff as Cass and Mangan for Fine, and then for a few other labels. And then from, who else did we do? We remixed like Justin Timberlake and some other sort of pop acts. And then that Justin Timberlake remix found its way to a guy called Jesse Rose, who was doing like a lot of stuff. Him and Switch and Trevor Loveys and these guys were kind of doing like a West London sort of housey thing, which went on to become Fidget. But before that, it was just kind of just really fucking good house music. And I ended up getting together with him. He was living in Berlin at the time, and sort of having a chat with him. And he kind of proposed this idea basically of doing an album for him. But, he was liking the Cass and Mangan stuff, but he wanted it to be under a new pseudonym. And subsequently, it's just such a mad idea, because we'd actually built up quite a head of steam as Cass and Mangan. We'd kind of we'd gathered, so we were doing some remixes and we were playing occasional shows and stuff. And to then just start a completely brand new artist project and do an album, it's fucking madness. You've literally got no fans whatsoever. But that is what we did. We started an artist project as Dead Set and put the Cass and Mangan stuff. We didn't even carry on doing Cass and Mangan stuff. We just literally put it to one side. We're like, okay, that's finished now. We'll stop doing that. The stuff that was like just barely paying the rent, if I'm completely honest. And then we went and did the Dead Set stuff, which was really cool, which meant that we got to play Panorama Bar, a couple of times, and I got to play there on my own as well, which was also lovely. And got to do some little European tours and go and do some other stuff. And that was the stuff that predated the T-Mango stuff. So it was then after that I kind of ended up moving. I moved to Berlin because I was doing some stuff with T. Schwartz's new label, a label called Souvenir, that they started kind of out the back of that sort of more electro-clashy kind of really like harsh electronic sounding stuff that became more sort of, it's like, I guess, pre-minimal sort of melodic German house music stuff. So I was doing some stuff for them. I was doing stuff for Jesse and my manager at the time, lovely girl called Sharon Norden, who was also managing who was she managing? Claude Von Stroke and Kevin Saunderson. She was in Berlin. Jesse was in Berlin. Souvenir were in Berlin. So I ended up moving to Berlin. So then Cass and I kind of stopped working together, and I started doing T-Mango stuff, kind of, the tail end of that year and a half, I think.
Yeah, it's such good stuff though, because I mean, it's all house music at the end of the day. But your stuff that was on Will's label, House Records, just got me. Again, I started, listening to prog house early 90s, but it just bored me, and I was looking for something else. I like my breaks as well. I love my broken beat, which Will has a lot on simple and on house. But yeah, your music just, and I didn't put two and two together for a long time. I didn't put the Tom Mangan to T-Mango because it was so different. And it wasn't till probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, how did I not know that? Because, I am a massive music aficionado. And it really, I was like, why did I not know that? I was just like, because it was so different from the stuff that you were doing. So I
guess you sort of taste changes over time. That's the thing. Your taste changes, and then also your skill changes. So there's like the combination of those things. And then, if I'm being completely honest, also tastes in the wider world change. And there are these artists, and I kind of, you look at them and you look at their, I don't know, you look at someone like Ian Pooley, for example, and that dude has been making, I think, pretty solidly, like, his old stuff stands up as much as his new stuff almost. You know what I mean? It's like there's not loads of, he hasn't gone through like a David Bowie style selection of different aliases. Not that I'm in any way liking myself to Bowie, right? So let's just get that out of the way. But more that, the completely different sort of versions of like creativity. There are some people that just like, they just manage to find something that they're good at, and they can stay interested in it, and they can just do it and do it and do it. For me, like, just kind of learning how to do stuff and learning how to express myself and learning how to, you know, express myself, even through some of the, like, the singing stuff, and then the play, learning how to play an instrument better, and learning how to, make the sounds more expressive, or the way that the kind of stuff's constructed. It's just a continuous, I don't know, continuous journey. And I think it's probably just going to continue changing and evolving and, being different, basically. I don't think I'm going to be the Impuli dude who that like settles into a groove, or, sort of someone, and I'm saying that with the most amount of respect. I'm not saying it in any way, it's like amazing. Or Scott Grooves, someone who, like, they just seem to just be making this music that is like almost timeless, like electronic music. I feel like, I don't feel like one of those dudes. I feel like I'm just going to be consistently like a sort of creative magpie, like, oh, this is really fucking interesting. I'm over here, I'm over there. And maybe that'll be with different pseudonyms or different, maybe it won't all be under the same name, but yeah, creatively, I think to keep moving, that's exciting for me.
Well, we're in a different time now, 2025, where, you know, you've got to have so many followers on Instagram. You have to have a TikTok account, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Music is shoved in people's faces, whether it's good or bad. What's your thoughts on, the music industry as a whole? A lot more clubs are shutting down, because people want this massive festival experience now. They'd rather pay, 200 quid to go see 30 DJs who only play an hour. I mean, for me, I grew up going to the club at 10 o'clock and listening to the resident DJ. The resident DJ is the one I used to like always love to really hear. Danny Howells I'm a massive fan of Danny, just because, he would start most of the Bedrock nights
Mm.
and he sets the tone. The resident DJ would set the tone for the night, and
Yeah.
obviously the headliner gets all the applause. But what's your thoughts on where kind of dance music's going, and are we going to go back underground in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I just think there's so many different strands and scenes, and it's easy to kind of like band loads of it together. I think the things that are exciting for me, and I've kind of had this conversation with one of my um, mates here, a guy called Leo, who runs an online radio and kind of online community called Amateurism. And we've had this conversation quite a lot recently, or kind of dug into this conversation. And it's like, at different stages in your life, you're looking for different things. So there's a kind of, there's a lot of my mates, for example, hitting Alphos, right? They're on their Alphos tip, which is like, it's generally, it maybe skews a little bit older than me. I think, it's kind of like mid 50s, maybe. Sean is, I think, mid 50s. And it's like, I love Sean. I think he's a great DJ. It's not quite like, I've not been as much as my mates have. Let's put it that way. I've been a couple of times, and I've had a nice time. But there are some people for whom that is like, this is what I want. This is where I want to go. There's also like I was speaking to a sort of local friend, and she's originally from Manchester, and she was down at like up at the Golden Lion in Tomorden, which has got like almost like a cultish following, as like a rave pub, essentially. but a rave pub with only the sort of very sort of specifically like curated level of people playing, like a kind of panorama level kudos points if you get to play the Golden Lion. I was speaking to Wallace. I don't know if you heard of Wallace. He's
Yeah,
young, going through the last couple of years.
yeah, brilliant.
He's absolutely smashing it. And he came and sort of did some chats. Actually, I first met him at my mate Leo's brother's pub, which is another rave pub, which is now sadly closed down, which was called the Marina Fountain in Hastings, which is where Cass lives. And I met Wallace when he was doing I think their closing party. We had a really good chat, and he was talking about the Golden Lion in Thamorden, and we ended up having him come and speak to the community that I run for music makers and kind of people who want to put records out basically. And he came and did like an artist Q&A. Fucking lovely dude, such a legend. But like he's played there. The weekend was like Manfredus and Dave Harvey from Love International and it's like got real jumbo kudos points. So I think there are places where there is the Lovin in Bristol. I'm going to in a few weekends time. The guys from the Marina Fountain. He's now got a promotion, a kind of party promoter called More Fountains, and he's booking some fucking awesome people. So it's Wallace, it's my mate Leo, and Gus Dreams, who used to be part of Multiculti. That's the night, like at the Love in Bristol, which I think is maybe 200 people. I'm not sure, 150, 200 people. Again, it's a rave pub. So I think that feels like a more authentically, maybe authentic is just a way of saying you're not like me. So maybe that's not the right thing. It feels more real for me for where I'm at. But I'm not an 18-year-old dude. I'm a 48-year-old man. So I don't go out every weekend. So there's not really a scene built around people like me. But what there is there's kind of 4 or 5 parties a year, that hopefully you can find at the right time with the right people. And good music's always nourishing for the soul. But in terms of the scene as a whole, I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about it, because it's not it's not something that I'm not out every weekend DJing. Again, I probably play like 3 or 4 shows a year. Sometimes really lovely shows, and sometimes I fly somewhere really random to play to next to no people. That's been my DJ career as a whole, if I'm completely honest with you. So I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about it, but what I do know is that I still find it really fucking exciting making music. It still feels like a real pleasure to be able to do it. It's still a real pleasure to hear my music played on the radio. It's still a real pleasure to get feedback from people. It's still a real pleasure to be in a place or a space and actually hear something that has been, that I've somehow created, in context, and see people smiling or enjoying themselves or with their heads down or, whatever. So it's still a complete vibe for me. But yeah, the scene as a whole, I don't know, I don't know if I'm qualified to dig into it.
It's all good. I'm in the same boat. It's hard to try and live in a 18-year-old, 19-year-old's mind, and I haven't been out in like years, and I just feel like if I did go out, I'd feel like the old man in the background being a bit of a creeper. But I'd probably still bust the move more than some of these kids.
I think it just depends where you are, man. Like there's a whole gaggle of us going to Glastonbury, for example, and so I go and play for my mate Leo for the amateurism gang, and they're a beautiful gang of souls of varying different ages, from like 20 to 60. And so it's that cross-generational raving, I think that's a thing that we're going to see more of. But I think that stuff generally happens during the day because folks of our of our age and older are less likely to be out until 6, 7 in the morning. That said, we did all go to Fabric for Leo Amateurism's 40th birthday. There was like 30 of us in Fabric until like 7 o'clock in the morning. for the fabric birthday in December, and it was fucking great, man. It was awesome. It was, and I probably haven't been to fabric for like 15 years, and it was the same in terms of I knew where everything was, and the vibe was high, and I didn't feel like the oldest swinger in town. It was good, man. It was enjoyable. Yeah, very enjoyable.
Yeah, I love fabric. I saw David Alvarado and Tom Middleton there the last time I was home, and I can't get enough of that what is it, the dance floor that shakes
Yeah,
underneath. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, but the first time that happened, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I
yeah.
was having like a fit or something, and then my mate was like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, I don't feel okay." He's like, "You fucking idiot! It's like in
Basically,
yeah, the base and
yeah,
the floor, you're not bad." I was like, "Oh, thank God." Yeah.
yeah. It's madness, absolute
But
madness.
Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure for you to come on and chat with me for, a little bit over an hour again. You know, not just because you're a Liverpool supporter, but I love the music you make. And that's a big thing about this podcast is I'm able to bring on people that I really, really admire, what you guys do. Because I know it's tough out there to put your art into this world. Especially when you've got like, Spotify and all this, like just pretty much taking everybody's money. The biggest thing I can say, like, is, thank you for, doing what you do. Um,
Thank
Everyone, please go check out Tom's Bandcamp. It's tmango.bandcamp.com. I'll always say Bandcamp because most of the money, will go to the artists, which
Yeah, absolutely.
they're the ones that make the art, not these record companies that kind of rip everyone off or Spotify or that bollocks. But yeah, please go check that out. And as I always say, put your earbuds on, go look for new artists, go look for new music. And, if somebody comes to town that you've never heard of, go out and see that person. You just never know. That might be your favorite DJ, your favorite band that you've never heard before. So please go check that out. Always, please look after yourselves. Stay safe. I've got a couple of other great guests coming up from, I've got Hospital Records, Label Boss, London Electricity, which I can't wait to get into some drum and bass with him, and a great live performer, John Monkman, who is over in Ibiza now and doing a lot of good things there. So yeah, please go check those out when they come out. Again, please like, subscribe, put your notifications on, and I'll see you next time.